today. What a great group this is. Wow. So let me see, I'm just going to take a head count. How many seniors are here? How many students who are about to graduate? Okay, congratulations, seniors. I think Dean Ricci told me this Friday is 100 nights, starting Friday. We start the countdown. Okay. And what color are the seniors?
Gold.
Gold class. Okay. How about juniors? How many juniors are here? Let's see. What color are the juniors? What color? Red. Red class. Okay. Red class. Red class. How about the sophomores? How many sophomores? What color are you? Blue class. Well, the best color is last because you know which color I love the most. The new students, first years, green class, right? Early first years. Okay. How many early college students are here? Let's see the early college academy students. Woo! And of the early college academy students here, how many of you are graduating in May? Let's see the graduates of early college. How many? Congratulations. We are so excited. This will be our first graduation for our early college students. It's so exciting. We can hardly wait for May when all of that happens. Did we run out of books in the back? Okay. If anybody didn't get a book, tell me afterwards, give me your name, and we'll get you a book later on. So you will have that if you would like a book. The other thing is when you got your books, you got a sticky note, right? The purpose of the sticky note, if you could print your name legibly and put that on the front of the book, after our talk, Jean very graciously will go back to the table in the back and do book signing. And she does it really fast, I'm told. Okay. So do that, and we'll line up here to do the book signing. And so thank you for that. Okay, well, we have I am so pleased to greet so many students, faculty, and staff. And Jean, I am so grateful for you for joining us today. And we are starting with a wonderful panel of Trinity women, representative Trinity women, who are going to ask you the first set of questions. And to introduce you, we start off with Andrea Chavez, who is a senior, a chemistry major. She's been a CSIS fellow. She's had a summer research internship at Johns Hopkins, and she is president of Ladies First, our STEM Student Honor Society. Andrea, take it away.
I am so pleased to be able to welcome Jean Case to Trinity and to introduce her to our audience. Jean is the CEO of the Case Impact Network, founder of For What It's Worth, and chair of the board of National Geographic. She was part of the team that created America Online, the first big tech company. She is an entrepreneur, explorer, philanthropist, and impact investor. Jean, I have a question. In your book, Be Fearless, you talk about taking risks and being resilient. The young women who are here at Trinity are ambitious, but we've been through a lot in the last few years with COVID, political unrest, and racial injustice. Based on the principles in Be Fearless, what advice would you give to Trinity students to overcome setbacks and seize opportunities? What are some examples of people who have done this?
Great, thank you, Andrea. And I just want to start, before I start answering your question, with telling you all how thrilled I am to be with you this morning. I have been following Trinity for quite some time. Thank you, President McGuire. We were just talking about the fact that really this day started several years ago when we were at a dinner together and your president was telling me how wonderful Trinity was and inviting me. So post-COVID, a few years went by, it wasn't an option really, but I'm super thrilled to be here, so thank you. And I actually consider it an honor to be with all of you. So, Andrea, your question goes to the very heart of why I wrote the book. Because people, it's very tempting for people, no matter what walk of life you come from. The last few years have been more challenging than ever for most people, right? But even take COVID aside, I have some sense of who you are as students and some of the challenges that you've been through. And the good news of Be Fearless, the central message is that you can take challenges, you can take the hardest things, And if you really apply and think, what things could come out of my challenge if I try to turn things around? That's how great things are created. In fact, the book is about principles that people have embraced to help them break through and find success and purpose. But really, it's not about the principles. It's about the people who apply them and how they use them in their lives to break through. So, Andrea and I were talking earlier. She has a physical challenge, a medical challenge, and she's using it now to drive forward with the future where she's going to try and be part of the solution, right, Andrea, of really addressing that. In my own life, what I can tell you is it was in the moments of greatest challenge or failure where I kind of wanted to hang my head and hide that I found some of the greatest things to be opportunities that followed that, but I couldn't have known that in those dark moments. So I'm here to tell you, you can use the greatest challenges in your life to dig deep and really think about, okay, what great things might I try to go do to overcome these challenges?
Thank you for your response.
Thank you so much. So, Jean, you were talking earlier about your own experience as a college student. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So sometimes before I'm introduced, I offer my own version of a resume, which I call my failure and challenge resume, okay? Because too often when you see people who maybe in your minds have found success, you don't know the story of their own challenges and their own failures that got them there. So much like I answered Andrea's question, that's really been my story. So when I was in your shoes in college, I was a Pell Grant student. So it was very challenging. I was the youngest of four being raised by a single mom. I was thrilled that I could get my college tuition paid for and some books. But beyond that, I couldn't get much at all. And so if I had special needs that are just a normal part of things that come up, right, as you're going through college, it wasn't like there was a fund I could tap into or extra money that I had to pay for it. So what I really want to say to many of you is, if you're a little bit like me, like I was back then, I just recognize how hard it is. And I want to say there's a world out there of people who want to come alongside and support you. And President McGuire and I were just talking about remarkable things here at Trinity to try to help kids find success no matter their challenges. But I was in your shoes. I know what that's like. And I have deep respect for you. Come in every day, do what you have to do, despite maybe having some challenges that make it harder than it would be for most.
Jean, thank you for sharing that. I think that empathetic response for our students is so important. And part of why it's important that you're here today is to show our students you can have those challenges in your life. You can have a Pell Grant, be worried about where your next meal is coming from, have a lot of challenges, and you can still triumph. And that's part of why we do what we do at Trinity, because our goal is to put that possibility of success in front of you and help you figure out how to achieve that goal. Now, the next success story we have many success stories here in the room. And by the way, after we finish with our student questions, I'm going to open the floor for questions. So be thinking about what questions you would like to ask, and you'll come up to the microphone in a little bit. But our next superstar is Deborah Del Cid. Deborah is an international affairs major. She's vice president of the senior class. She also was a CSIS fellow. And she also had a fellowship last summer at Middlebury on nuclear non-proliferation, right? So she's quite the superstar. Deborah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Ted. And thank you so much, Jean, for joining us today. Sometimes women don't try to do big things because we're afraid of failing, of looking silly, or stepping out of our comfort zone. In your book, you talk a lot about overcoming the fear of failure. So what are some of the things you've experienced in your life that helped you develop the ability to recover from failure and eventually succeed?
Thanks for that question, Deborah. So I have bad news for you, and I have good news for you. And it's the same thing. In your life, you will have failures. You may have already had some along your college journey. So that's not cool. No one wants to feel like they have failures. But the best news is it's actually from failure that the greatest things are born. And you ask, what are some examples of that? And I would put not just failure, but going back to that conversation we had about challenges. So there was a woman who was born in 1867. Okay, so we're going back before Trinity was founded now, right? It feels like forever ago. And she was the daughter of slaves born in the South on a plantation. And she had a really tough life. She was, her parents died very young. She had a sibling raise her who became abusive. So to escape that, at 14, she got married and went into another abusive relationship, was a mom of several children in her teens, and then her husband died when she was 20. What was she going to do? She didn't really have a skill, she didn't have a trade, but her brothers were barbers, and she had this serious challenge with her hair. It was falling out, and she didn't know what to do about it. So she worked with her brothers and came up with a concoction, basically not only a concoction, but a treatment for how to care for hair. And it was miraculous. She ended up getting remarried, and she became known as Madam C.J. Walker. Now, maybe I see some heads shaking. I don't usually see heads shaking when I tell them this story. But if you know the story, it's remarkable, because on my most challenging days, or when I've had failures, I think about her. Because she went on not just to create and market one of the greatest hair care products of her time, but she managed to train thousands of black young women around the United States by going city to city to city to train them on her hair care product and provide jobs for women for whom there were no real professional jobs, and gave great opportunity. She became what is often called the first sort of self-made female millionaire of her time. But what I love is not that. It's that she really counted her own legacy in terms of what she did around philanthropy and around the opportunity she gave to many, many others. And so it's a story, I think, can you just imagine, she was risking her life to even drive to these other cities. People were saying, you're not gonna find black women you can train, are you kidding me? And she trained thousands of them. And to me, it's just a very inspirational story of someone born without, but she never looked at her life in terms of deficits. She looked at her life in terms of, what do I have that I can make something more out of? And I find her story to be really inspirational. I will say, one of the stories I also tell in the book is of two guys who had gone to the Rhode Island School of Design, a very kind of, frou-frou kind of place to go in terms of the career you're going to jump into. And they moved to San Francisco, and they were starting out in their careers in design, and they couldn't pay their bills. They couldn't make rent. Come on, it's San Francisco, There were two guys sharing an apartment. Well, their landlord let them know, that rent's overdue, and if I don't get it, you're not going to have this apartment anymore. So they decided, they had heard about a big conference coming to San Francisco. They heard that all the hotels were sold out, and certainly anything affordable for young people coming to that conference wasn't available. So they bought 3 air mattresses, put them on their floor, and started advertising that if you wanted to go to this conference, for $80 you could sleep on their floor, and oh, by the way, they would throw breakfast in. Well, it seems pretty crazy, right? Would you just stay with strangers? That worked really well, and from that they had an idea. They sold the 3 air mattresses, and they started talking to others about what if you do that. Well, that story of 2 kids who did that because they couldn't pay rent, they had failed literally to make enough money to even live, became the start of Airbnb. And when they went, to investors, they're going, you're crazy, like no one's ever going to go stay in the house of a stranger. Well, today, of course, there are millions of people every night in Airbnbs all over the world in more than 191 countries. But the founder says that it was exactly what he did not know that helped make him successful. And I just want to touch on that very quickly if I can, and we'll go on to the next question, which is sometimes you sit there and you say, I don't have what it takes. I have this idea, but I don't have what it takes. Time and time again, if you read the book, you will hear from remarkable achievers that what they didn't know was their advantage, because had they been schooled in the hotel industry, they would have said, oh, we can't do that because we don't have blah, blah, blah. They just didn't know, and they started something crazy, and look where they are today.
Jean, thank you so much for that. That's great. You know, I was so pleased when I read your book. I was so pleased to see you relate the story of Madam C.J. Walker, because when I read our student application essays for coming to Trinity, many cite her example. And many of our students want to be entrepreneurs. How many of you would like to start a business or have ideas that you'd like to get going? Let's see, raise your hands. Let's see, there's a couple out there. So, yeah, you know, you've got ideas, and I urge you to read this book and learn that you don't have to have it all figured out up front. You've got to have the zest, the zeal, the energy to do it. You know, I often tell the story about myself. When I became Trinity's president, I had no executive training at all. I'd never done anything like this. And somebody said, well, why did the board let you have this job? And I said, well, because I was so young and inexperienced, I didn't know what to be afraid of. And sometimes you can be fearless if you've never worked in the biz before. And sometimes being fearless, which is what the name of your book is better than having all the skills in the world. So keep that in mind. Not knowing is sometimes the energy that you have to make it happen. And it's such a great inspiration, Jane. So I'm going to introduce another fearless woman, Karen Cruz Carvajal, who is a international affairs and political science major also. And she is, ta-da-ta-da, drum roll please, the senior class president. Welcome, my senior class.
So the National Geographic has always captured the public imagination through its beautiful photography and stories from faraway places. But National Geographic has always embarked on some ambitious programs to address environmental issues, particularly in Africa. Can you talk more about these initiatives and how your leadership is opening new areas of opportunity for science and exploration to solve global problems?
Sure, I'd love to talk to you about National Geographic. It's so close to my heart, and I had the privilege of serving the institution for well over a decade and serving as chairman for 7 years. I was telling Pat earlier, it was founded right here in Washington, D.C., exactly 135 years ago. Last month we celebrated our 135th birthday. And, you know, academia aside, because academia and schools have a way of enduring despite ups and downs, and I know this place has had a lot of challenges through its years, but that's not so true of organizations. In fact, you know, many of the Fortune 500 turn over every year. So if we look at the Fortune 500, very few companies, and I mean literally a handful, were on there at the time that National Geographic was born, okay? Because what happens is organizations don't tend to adapt to the times. And people can sometimes have this problem too, which is really relying on whatever they had at the beginning and thinking, oh, we can't change that or we can't do that because that's part of our legacy. But I've been very fortunate to chair an organization where we say the status quo is not in our DNA. So today, for instance, although we got started with a print magazine 135 years ago and funded audacious exploration all over the world, today the organization looks very different. We are the #1 social media brand in the world. I hope some of you follow us on Instagram, and if you do, you're one of more than 200 million followers that we have on Instagram. Our combined businesses, we're a nonprofit parent that has a joint venture structure, so for-profit businesses are under us. They touch 2 billion people around the globe every single month. But here's the other really exciting thing. When I joined the board, there was only one other woman on the board, and it was a board of 22, okay? And it seemed to me, and this is a message of Be Fearless, which is called Reach Beyond Your Bubble, the best organizations, the best teams, represent diverse thinking based on different backgrounds and experiences. That's how you get excellence. Ask the world's leading consulting companies, and they can give you research after research after research. So it's not just a nice to have wannabe because we all think that's right. It's a way to be killer. So I was worried that there was a lack of diversity around National Geographic in our Explorer class, at our board level, and in the C-suite. And I'm here to tell you today that today our board has gender parity, one of the few boards in the world that has gender parity. We have 35% diverse mix on the board. What was 81% male, mostly white, in the Explorer class when I became chair, today is 51% female, and there are over 80 countries represented in our Explorer base. And the most exciting thing is, through the years, when we got started, what was really common was to take Americans and send them to other places to do exploration of those places. What we've changed today is the people doing exploration are of that place. All right, if there's exploration going on in Guatemala, it's done by somebody from Guatemala who knows the community, who really feels it. And so I think organizations like us, like nature, need to adapt and evolve. And the real secret of National Geographic that most people aren't aware of is that has been the secret. We too, as an organization, have evolved just like the world we cover around us.
Jean, thank you so much for that. That was great. I grew up with National Geographic. I loved it, and I always wanted to go to all those places. I don't know how many of you have dreamed of going to all those places, but someday maybe we'll get there. One of the things I've read about National Geographic is that you're doing some environmental work in Africa. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because we've got a big environmental justice program here.
Yeah, there's two main, what we call conservation and environmental efforts we have going on. Believe me, we have many, many more, but I'm going to talk about our two really signature initiatives. One of them is called Pristine Seas. That's happening all over the world, where we're taking the most pristine areas of our oceans and we're getting them set aside as marine protected areas. We have 22 of them around the globe that represent more than 7 million square kilometers today. We do this by working carefully in country with leaders and with organizations and with the people in the country to get great buy-in, and they make the decision that they want to set aside and protect the waters around them. So that's been very successful. In Africa, I just got back. Again, kind of unusual for an organization to host board meetings in other countries. But we just had our first board meeting in the bush in the history of National Geographic Society. In September, 17 trustees traveled together, our board, to Botswana and spent a week in the field with our explorers, up close and personal, had a close encounter with a raging male bull elephant. And we couldn't understand why, but we had our elephant expert explorer with us. And what we had discovered was this dad had a baby elephant whose tusk had just been cut by poachers. So there was a reason he was a raging bull elephant at us, and we got out of there just in time. It wasn't his fault. He was doing exactly what any of us would do if we were confronted by people after seeing a loved one attacked. So in Botswana and in Angola and Namibia, we have a conservation area of that whole delta. The headwaters start in Angola, they go through Namibia, and they go into the delta, the Okavango Delta in Botswana. And that work involves many, many villages, many, many leaders, a number of explorers, and it's very exciting. We've been working with the government of Angola to get those headwaters protected. And you can imagine the number of species that have been protected as a result of our work there.
That is so great. Gosh. I had a whole board meeting there. That is great. Very, very good. So our next Trinity woman is Katie Lopez. Katie is a communication and political science major and currently interning with Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of our heroes. So, Katie, take it away.
Thank you. So, like many other Trinity students, I'm very interested in how we can become leaders for serious change. Do you believe that we can achieve social and political change? What advice can you give this audience of young women who want to make a real change in their communities and this nation? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and congratulations, Katie, on what you're doing.
Thank you.
So a lot of the stories in the speaker list are of young women, and some of them are of social change or something related to it. Because I'm on a college campus here, I was talking to President McGuire before we got started. Some of you may know the program Swipe Out Hunger. Have any of you heard of it? So it really is the story of a young woman who was at UCLA, and there was, just these typical signs put around. We have a hunger problem on campus. Any of you want to come and volunteer? And she was really bummed when she went, and there was only one other student that had shown up, and they were collecting food and boxing food and taking donations. They really weren't, putting a scratch into the problem. So eventually, when they were in the cafeteria talking about it, they got a few others to join them. They looked and they realized, and you guys do this too, right? The swipes, the way that students use swipes at lunch. So they said, well, goodness, I wonder if a student could say, I want to swipe for someone else, or I want some of my credits to go to someone who can't afford lunch today. If you kind of fast forward the story, today it truly is a nationwide program. I think it's over hundreds and hundreds of college campuses, and it's been institutionalized. But as Rachel was getting started, there were many people on campus who criticized her and really said, you can't mess with that, and particularly some of the people in the cafeteria who worked there. So what are you doing? You're threatening our jobs. But they knew better and they stayed at it. When it became so big that it had to become its own nonprofit, Rachel decided she wanted to be president of the nonprofit. And Katie, she literally had a male student say to her, you can't be president, you're too nice. And there is this myth that I certainly have tried really hard to debunk in my own, climb up the ladder, that actually you can be a really nice person. You can be a really caring and empathetic person. And you can still be, sorry for the language, kick-ass in your own way. They're not mutually exclusive. So Rachel, despite being intimidated and worrying about what people think, went for it and was named president, and has really helped this organization explode. So to me, she is, just really one of those examples of a female who took it forward. There are a number of different examples I put in there. One is of an individual counselor who was a family counselor, and it was during when the war was raging with Iraq and Afghanistan, and we had a tremendous need in the nation for mental health support of families whose parents had done multiple tours of duty. So she started asking her friends in the business, would you dedicate an hour a week for a family that otherwise can't afford it? And she asked more and more people. And then one day she said, this isn't enough. We're never really going to put a dent in the problem here. So she started an organization called Give an Hour. And she began to make it more formal to ask doctors all over the nation to take in these families to provide help. And before she was done, 10,000 doctors around the nation answered the call. And she was so successful in what she did. But the real story about Barbara is not just that she built this amazing organization that had a real impact in society. It's that when she got started, she didn't even have an assistant. She was one family doctor with an answering machine in her office. No organization, no background in building, big structures. And she became so successful through her efforts that Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. And if she was here, she'd tell you, no one believed that I could take that forward and do what I did. So.
Wow, Jean, that is such a story. I love those stories, and I have great respect, by the way, for Swipe Out Hunger and what Rebecca did, and it's such a very important message. One of the things you talked about was when the guy said, well, you're too nice, you can't do that. How many of you have been told that you can't do something, what you can't do? I certainly have, and even as you go up the ladder. In fact, I always say, the higher you go up the ladder, the closer you get to the glass ceiling, and the more you can see through the glass ceiling to what goes on the other side. And they're still in there in those smoke-filled rooms telling the women and the women of color and the women or men from low-income backgrounds what you can't do. And our job is to smash right through that. You can never let somebody tell you what you cannot do if you want to figure out how to get there. Our job as teachers, and as your teachers, and as educators, is to help you figure out the pathway to get there, and how to wield the hammer to break that ceiling if need be. So our messages are always, never let somebody tell you what you can't do. Never let somebody say, oh, you're just going to be another statistic. How many of you have heard that phrase? Oh, you're just going to be another statistic. What a terrible phrase. It's horrible. Instead, you can be the next generation most influential women in the world. You can do that. And that's part of what we do here at Trinity all the time. So another great influential woman is our last questioner here, Dulce. Dulce is a third-year student, and she is majoring in business and health services, Dulce Alarcon, and she wants to start her own medical business at some point. So she's quite So Dulce, take it away.
Good morning. I want to start off by saying making big changes is expensive, and most of us don't have that money to create big initiatives. In your biography, it talks about investing, and I'd like to begin to say, what does that mean? And also, how can students here at Trinity begin to know about investing in capital for their projects?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's always that period of time where you're testing out your idea, right? You're floating it. I have one young female entrepreneur that I worked with, and it wasn't until her third idea for a new company that it really caught hold. So if you have these ideas, part of it is, how can you do what is called minimum viable product, right? How far can you take it before you actually ask people to invest in it with you? That's an important step if you have ideas for new businesses. And it just takes scrappiness. You just find ways, you call who you can, you get help here or there. But once you really have a proven idea and you can demonstrate that it's investment worthy, there are those out there going, and I believe what you were talking about is impact investing. So impact investing, and I have to give the Catholic Church huge credit here because they were among the earliest impact investors. Impact investing really is looking at not just trying to get a financial return, but making sure a social benefit or some kind of benefit comes out of what someone is creating as well. So of course, in the fields of healthcare, and those things are obvious. But today, for instance, there's a whole new generation of entrepreneurs who are thinking about new ways of farming that use less water, that don't use, the terrible pesticides. I see head shaking. I know some of you are part of the environmental studies here as well, or activities. But there's EVs. I drive the first electric pickup truck that was ever made, and it's brand new. And they said it could be done as this young entrepreneur was taking it forward. And it happened to be built. I was born in Illinois with a cornfield in my backyard that I used to play in. And that cornfield today is the factory for this company, Rivian. So not only is it an electric vehicle that is amazing, it goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I mean, it is beyond awesome. It is totally reinventing how we think about automobiles. It's not Tesla. It is a total reinvention. And he made the pickup truck because, remember what President McGuire was saying, that can't be or whatever. Sometimes when people say, that's a stupid idea, or you can't take that forward, as I point out in the book, there's a principle called let urgency conquer fear. When you hear those words, perk up. In fact, don't ignore them. Put them to work with the I'll show you, okay? So as this young founder thought about a future for automobiles and he wanted to see electric, everybody said, yeah, but we're never going to be able to do pickup trucks. Now, why would pickup trucks matter anyway? Well, a little trivia. The top 3 vehicles sold in the United States today are all pickup trucks. And when you add them together, they dwarf the number of other vehicles sold. So if you want to impact with electric vehicles, where would you go? Let's build the hardest thing to build, but that will have the greatest impact. So that's impact investing. And in that company, Amazon wanted to change their fleet to electric. So they ordered 100,000 electric Amazon vans from that country. from that company. But impact investing, my guess is that as I saw a few hands, and maybe there's more, but you're not really ready to out yourself yet, that you have a business idea, chances are you're thinking about some kind of positive impact. And if you're not, I can tell you, looking at you in this audience today and knowing a little bit about the Trinity community, we need you. You've lived a different life than a lot of other people have. And to date, when you think about it, a lot of innovation has just made a privileged world more convenient or easier. What we need is people who have lived the hard things and they're thinking about, how can innovation help me? How can innovation help the community I grew up in? We need those new voices. And to your point, there really is a new generation of investors. And when I say generation, I'm not talking about age. There's a new era in investing of people like me who are much quicker to write a check if I can see there's a social benefit, and particularly if it's in an area that, let's say, the elites in Silicon Valley can't relate to. So they won't come up with those ideas, but you can.
Jean, thank you so much. That is so powerful. Wow. I'm going to invite you for questions from the audience. Please come stand at the microphone, and as you come up to the microphone, please tell us your name and maybe what your class year is and your major, and please don't be shy. So please, members of the audience, come forward to the microphone. While they're thinking about doing that, Jean, I'm going to follow up your last statement just to say, you and your great husband, Steve Case, decided to get out of the technology business when you left America Online, but there's many other entrepreneurs who are still in it. Why did you get out of technology and started the Case Foundation?
Did you want me to ask?
Yeah, go right ahead, and quickly, and then we'll go to the next question.
In a nutshell, we felt very privileged to have been part of the internet revolution, building the internet. And we were given tremendous resources, and we felt that it was deserving of our time and talent to look at how we could put those resources to work in the world outside of technology. And so, in a nutshell, that's really what we did.
Terrific. Thank you. Please tell us your name and major and pleasure.
All right. Hello, my name is Nelly Karina. I am a junior, and I plan to major in business administration. So, actually, before I ask my question, I'm actually really excited to finally reach it. I actually got introduced to a TED Talk. I think a couple of years about the American dream and the importance of making it approachable, diversity, and inclusivity. So that's actually one of the reasons why I went to Trinity, because those were the words that really stood out to me. So as I was really here, I was kind of getting to meet you. So my question to you is, how do we convince companies to shift from profit-based businesses to redefining capitalism and the purpose of businesses to be more philanthropic? And the other question is, do you think that the pandemic has helped creating more sustainable careers now that we are post-pandemic, or making a new era of people being more willing to take risks?
Yeah, really, really good questions. Tell me the first part again.
The first part is, how do we shift the idea of businesses?
Capitalism and philanthropy and how we help companies be good guys, right? And good guys. Yeah. So I'm very excited as I sit here this morning because you're all thinking about what's ahead in your future. Some of you already know your next step, as we've talked about, but many of you don't. And, if you're thinking about the private sector, there cannot be a more exciting time to go into the private sector. And, I often say everybody when they're young is drawn to change making and very idealistic. And I wish we could bottle that and keep that with you for your whole life. But often what we see as you set out in your career, you can get a little discouraged by the environments you see. And a lot of times when I spend time with students, they'll say, well, what I really want to do is start a nonprofit or go work on, on this problem over here, but I have to go into a company to make money. And I say, be a change maker from within. And there are many examples. I'm all about corporate philanthropy. It is never going to get us to where we need to be. How we get to where we're going to be is when the main products, when the very areas of focus that are tied to revenue also bring benefit to the world in some way. And it's those companies who are thinking about sustainability, who are thinking about the environment, who are thinking about, oh gosh, what's the impact of this packaging, etc., that will move the needle so much more than any amount of philanthropy we're going to put over there to do those things. So I'm very excited. I'm fresh from last weekend, where I spent time with a number of corporate CEOs, and I do that as part of my work generally. And I'll give you an example of one company. You may have heard of them only if you have an iPhone. Otherwise, I don't know that you would know them. Their name is Corning. And when I was growing up, everybody knew them. They were a glass maker. They used to make dishes. That's how we knew them. Maybe they still do. But then, when Steve Jobs visited Corning and said, "You're the best glass company in the world, and I want you to make the glass for iPhones," people started paying attention. Hugely innovative company, over 100 years old. If you just take a peek at Corning's website, if you get a minute, and look at what they say about what they think it takes to be a successful company. They talk about caring for the environment. They talk about the health and well-being of their employees. They talk about sustainability. But the good news is they don't just talk it. They actually are walking the walk in a number of different ways that they run the company. So there's no question in my mind today. CEOs are struggling with them. Some of them are stiff-arming, right? They don't want to go there. But what they do know is people like yourselves who are looking at where they'll go can ask those questions. What are you doing for this world? What are you doing for your communities? And they know that they have to adapt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patrice Nielsen. I'm a professor of environmental studies here, and we have many students who are passionate about environmental justice issues. I was wondering if you could tell us if National Geographic has any ways that students could get involved with your work, whether it's different programs or scholarships or fellowships or volunteer opportunities, or what's available there for them to get involved.
Thanks for asking that. We are running a social media campaign right now to support a huge effort called the Slingshot Challenge. And we invite all of you to apply. Comes with a $10,000 award for those that make it through to the finals. But what we're really looking for is what solutions do you see that you can bring forward in this space? And we've tried to be exceedingly inclusive in our approach here. It's not like you have to know how to write a grant application or something like that. We just want the ideas. So if you're on social media, look it up. It's called Slingshot Challenge. Beyond that, we are again starting, we did not have it for a number of years, student travels, and I would encourage even college students to consider that. In many cases, it's quite costly, but we have some opportunities for some students to get scholarships to go on those trips. And then we have internships, but you can't intern at National Geographic until you're in college, so it's not available to high school students. But in some years, for the 100 intern slots we've had many thousands of applications. So it's very, very hard to get into. But I know you Trinity students, and I've been listening to particularly if I've ever told us details, and any one of those examples are students we'd love to have.
Hi, my name is Suhey Morales. I am a business administration major, and my question is, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome.
Oh my goodness. I'm very open in the book about my failures, and I'm very open in the book about my own imposter syndrome challenges that I have. I definitely have been, and this still happens, by the way. It's not like I'm over, okay? It still happens to me at different times where I get like, what am I doing in this room? And I would love to say that it is a universal problem. It turns out it's not. It is more of a challenge for those who are outliers, who aren't in the mainstream or the norm of the room or the table that they're at. And so, I talk in the book about different things I've done through my life to overcome it. But in the same way I said, if someone is saying to you, why you? Or that's crazy, if you can just dig deep and use that in the same way many of the successful people I spotlight in the book have, it's not like we don't feel it. And fearlessness is not a lack of fear. I have a lot of fears. fearlessness, looking fear in the eye and going forward. And I would say that going forward anyway, okay? And I would say that's really what I've done with imposter syndrome. It hits all the time. I recognize it when it's there. I dig deep, and I smile, and I fake it till I make it. I mean, that really, there's just no other way to say it. And, you know, I really want to encourage all of you. I hope you have a head talk. And let me just go to one point we really haven't talked about a lot, which is a lot of us believe not just to have breakthroughs, but even to belong in a room or at a table, you have to have some special genius. You have to come from only a certain number of schools. You have to know rich people. You have to have money. You have to. The reason I wrote the book is time and time again, it is what we would call ordinary people who have broken through and done extraordinary things. But their secret for doing that is exactly this point, which is to say, I belong here. I'm pushing against the very head talk that's telling me I need to do something different. And I do hope, if you haven't had a chance to look at the book, I do hope you'll read it. Because I personally, as I was writing it, Louise is here with me from our team, I would get inspired. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like this person who everyone counted out did that. And so the story of fearlessness is the story of people who think they can't, who think they don't have what it takes, who have head talk sometimes that's saying it can't be you. And they're saying, yes, it can.
Thank you very much. Jean, this is so inspiring. And I think most of the people in the room know that imposter syndrome inflicts all of us. I certainly go into meetings and go downtown to events, and sometimes I'm like, what am I doing here? You know, why was I included in this thing? Then the president of Georgetown is there, you know, that's a big, you know. And then I'm like, no, Jack and I are the same. So you have to sometimes, yeah, right? And sometimes the be fearless thing, you might be afraid of someone else, but you know who your biggest competition is? Yourself. Your biggest competition is right up here. And that's part of what women's colleges try to work on, that it's not about some guy out there telling you what you can't do, it's about you putting up fences that you shouldn't put up. You've got to tear down the fences in your own head. It happens to all of us, it happens to me, it happens to you, and you might look at us and say, well, you're not afraid of anything. Oh no, let me start. I can give you a long list. But you get up in the morning, by the time I drive in here in the morning, I'm like, I'm going to do it today. I'm going to make a big bet today, right? So I was reading Jean's book over the weekend again, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to tell the senior staff about that this week. And I did, right? Didn't I, senior staff? I started quoting your 5 principles, right? Because we all need that. So Jean, you've done wonderful therapy for our group here at Trinity, right? How about a big hand for Jean Case? How about that? So, we're going to go back to the table and do book signing for a little bit, and then some of us are going to lunch. Okay?
Great. Good. Thanks. I was inspired by that.